My parents kept me excluded from Christmas for years and focused all their affection on my brother. But during his job interview, HR revealed that I was the CEO, and his expression drained of color. My name is Selene Drayton. I'm 32, and I serve as the CEO of Techician Solutions, a tech startup that has grown into a mid-sized company with more than 200 employees. Yet my path to success had nothing to do with family encouragement. If anything, it was the opposite. I grew up in Pittsburgh as the family outsider. My parents, Edmund and Isolde, were very clear about who their favorite was: my younger brother, Alaric. 3 years younger than me, he always received everything: the newest gadgets, endless opportunities, and above all, their complete attention. From early childhood, I realized I needed to rely on myself. My parents were present for every one of Alaric's Little League games and school plays. But they rarely attended my academic competitions or piano recitals. "We're busy with Alaric's events" became the phrase I heard most often. The difference became even more obvious when I reached college age. "We've been saving for Alaric's education since he was born," my father told me when I asked about financial support. "He wants to become a doctor or a lawyer one day." Then came the familiar line: "Selene, you've always managed on your own." So I did. I graduated with honors in computer science and business administration, while working 3 part-time jobs and taking a full course load at the State University. Meanwhile, Alaric spent freshman year partying at an expensive private college, eventually dropped out, and then convinced our parents to finance a gap year, which turned into 3 years of traveling through Europe and Asia, fully paid by them. After college, I secured an entry-level job at a small tech company. The salary was low, but the experience was valuable. I lived in a cramped studio, worked 60-hour weeks, and used every spare moment to build my skills and develop side projects. While Alaric posted photos from beaches around the world, I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing code and working towards something meaningful. My big breakthrough came 5 years ago. I created an AI-powered customer relationship management system, pitched it to countless investors, and faced many rejections before I finally secured enough funding to launch Techician Solutions. The first 2 years were extremely challenging. I worked non-stop and invested everything I had to keep the company alive. By the 3rd year, our software started gaining attention. Major corporations adopted our platform, revenue increased, and we expanded into a real office. I finally began paying myself a decent salary. There were moments when it seemed like we wouldn't survive. Funding was tight, and the product still needed improvement. But I kept pushing forward. This year, Techician Solutions became a significant name in the tech world, with a valuation exceeding $200 million. During this time, communication with my family faded to the occasional holiday call. My parents never asked about my company, and whenever I attempted to share my progress, they immediately redirected the conversation to Alaric's latest plan, which typically failed before they even finished describing it. Eventually, Alaric returned to the US, and through our parents' connections, found a job at a marketing firm. He barely met expectations, yet received constant praise from our parents. "Alaric is really establishing himself," my mother would say, ignoring the fact that I was running a successful company. Then, 3 weeks before Christmas, everything shifted. I was in my corner office overlooking Seattle, reviewing year-end reports, when my mother called, something she rarely did. "Selene, dear," she said in the overly sweet tone she used whenever she needed something. She invited me to Christmas Eve, which was unusual since I typically received a last-minute text invitation, if anything at all. The early call made me hopeful. "That sounds nice, Mom," I replied. And then came the real purpose of her call. She mentioned that Alaric was bringing his new girlfriend, Marigold Vance, who worked at Hardgrove and Partners, a well-known consulting firm. Her father was a partner there. My mother launched into details: Marigold's Harvard background, her fast track to junior partner, her family's reputation. My father had even been bragging about Alaric dating a Harvard graduate. I gently tried to share my own achievements. "Mom, Taish was featured in Forbes last month, and we're planning to expand into Europe next year." "That's nice, dear," she replied quickly, before returning to discussing Marigold's family, their connections, and their house in the Hamptons. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Very exciting. I have to get back to work." A week before Christmas, while preparing for my trip, my father called. He rarely called me, so I answered right away. His tone was stern. "I'm calling about Christmas. Your mother and I think it would be better if you didn't come this year." I froze. "Alaric's girlfriend comes from an influential family," he continued. "We don't want anything to complicate things." "Complicate things?" I asked quietly. He repeated that Marigold and her family were wealthy and connected, and that he wanted them to see the Draytons as respectable. "So I'm not respectable?" I asked, unable to hide the hurt. "Don't twist my words," he snapped. "Your brother has a real opportunity here. We don't need you bringing in your alternative lifestyle." "Alternative lifestyle?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Dad, I'm the CEO of a tech company." He went on about me being too independent, too focused on my career, and always trying to outshine my brother. "So-called success," he said, referring to my achievements. It was clear I wasn't being excluded because of anything I had done. I was being excluded because of who I had become: independent, successful, and unwilling to downplay my accomplishments. "I understand," I said steadily. "Enjoy your Christmas." He sounded relieved. "Your mother will call after the holidays." When the call ended, I stared at the Seattle skyline as the winter sun faded. I had created this life on my own. Yet it still wasn't enough for them. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. For the child who never felt valued. For the teenager who worked herself sick for approval she never received. And for the adult who still wished her parents would see her. When I finished crying, I composed myself and returned to work. If I wasn't welcome at their Christmas, I would make my own plans. It was my first Christmas alone, and the silence was overwhelming. From my rooftop apartment, I could see the Space Needle glowing with holiday lights. I decorated a small tree and a few ornaments. My executive assistant, Callista, texted me, offering her family's eggnog and inviting me over. I politely declined. Then my best friend from college, Olia, messaged, "Merry Christmas. The kids want to know when Auntie Selene is coming. There's a glass of wine with your name on it." She knew me well. After thinking it over, I replied, "Give me an hour. I'll bring dessert." I stopped by the only open bakery for a chocolate cake, then drove to her house. As I arrived, her twins ran out in their pajamas. I told them I finished work early and followed them inside. Olia's home was everything mine wasn't: warm, festive, and filled with family energy. She hugged me tightly. Her husband greeted me with a smile, their toddler in his arms. We shared a wonderful meal, exchanged gifts, played games, and talked. No one asked about my job or compared me to anyone. I was simply part of the celebration. Later, while helping Olia clean the kitchen, I said softly, "Thank you. I needed this more than I realized." She squeezed my shoulder. "Your family, Becca. You always have a place here." That word, family, brought both comfort and sadness. When I got home, I found a message from Alaric. It included a photo of my parents' Christmas celebration. They stood smiling with Marigold in front of the same tree from my childhood home. "Wish you could have been here," he texted. "It was crowded. Maybe next year." The house was large enough for dozens of people. It wasn't about space. As I looked at the photo, I saw clearly. I didn't belong in that picture. They didn't want me there. Something shifted in me. I stopped chasing validation I would never receive and chose to focus on what I had built for myself. During the week between Christmas and New Year's, I immersed myself in work. With the office empty, I refined our 5-year expansion plan, explored European partnerships, and drafted a new marketing strategy. When Callista returned in January, she was surprised to find my entire office reorganized. "Did you work all holiday?" she asked. "I had a breakthrough," I said. "This is going to be our strongest year so far." Over the next 3 months, Techician Solutions secured 2 major Fortune 500 contracts, finalized our European expansion, and began developing a new AI product with the potential to reshape the industry. During that time, I barely thought about my family. My parents didn't contact me, and I didn't reach out to them. Alaric sent the occasional update about Marigold, and I replied politely, without sharing anything personal. As a result, the company continued to grow. By March, I was completely focused on preparing for our largest expansion to date. We were moving into a bigger office in downtown Seattle and bringing on dozens of new employees across every department. Techician Solutions was no longer a startup, but a major force in the tech industry, with me leading it. "Celine, do you have a minute?" Our HR director, Elone Price, asked as she stepped into my office one afternoon in mid-March. "Of course, Elone. What's going on?" She walked in, closed the door behind her, and held a folder with an unusual expression, somewhere between amused and uneasy. "We've received more than 300 applications for the senior project manager roles," she said as she took a seat. The hiring team narrowed them down to about 20 candidates for the first round of interviews. "That's great news," I replied, unsure why this conversation needed to happen in person instead of by email. "Are the candidates strong?" "For the most part, yes," she said. "But there's one application I thought you should see." She pushed the folder toward me. Inside was a resume belonging to my brother, Alaric Drayton. I skimmed through it, noticing exaggerated job titles and vague accomplishments. His current role was listed as executive marketing strategist at a small local company, though in reality, he was a mid-level marketing associate at best. "Were you aware he applied?" Elone asked carefully. She was one of the few people at Techician who knew anything about my family. "No," I said, still staring at the resume. "I had no idea." "He was very confident during the phone screening," she added with a small laugh. "Actually, he was somewhat condescending to Saran on the HR team. He assumed she was just a receptionist and asked to speak with someone who actually makes decisions." I grimaced. That sounded exactly like Alaric. The position requires at least 5 years of project management experience and proficiency in 3 programming languages, Elaine continued. "As you can see, he doesn't meet those qualifications. But he asked to be considered for a senior role rather than entry-level." I leaned back, trying to think clearly. Alaric had no idea I was the CEO of Techician Solutions. I had always used my middle name, Victoria, in public-facing announcements to keep some privacy, and he had never shown much interest in my work. But now, possibly because the company's rapid growth had made headlines, he had unknowingly applied to my company. "What would you like to do?" Elone asked. "There's obviously a conflict of interest." I thought about my options. I could reject him immediately, which would be fair given his lack of qualifications. I could fully step away from the process and allow the hiring team to decide, without knowing we were related. Or I could let the situation unfold and allow him to see the reality of my professional life. Treat his application like any other, I said. If he doesn't meet the basic requirements, he shouldn't move forward. Lon hesitated. On paper, he isn't qualified, but he did mention some contacts with potential clients. The team thought those might be useful, so they advanced him to the next round despite the missing technical experience. Connections. That was how Alaric had always been promoted, based on people he knew, not skills he had. When is his interview? I asked. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I made a decision. I won't be involved in the hiring process directly. That would be inappropriate. But I'd like to observe the interview. Please arrange for me to sit in anonymously. Just introduce me as a senior board member. We can do that, she said. The panel won't mention your name or title. Once she left, I stared at Alaric's resume, feeling conflicted. Part of me felt bad. It might seem like I was setting him up. But another part, the part that had been ignored and underestimated for years, wanted him to see who I really was. Not the sister he dismissed, but a CEO who had built something through hard work and persistence. That night, sleep wouldn't come easily. I mentally rehearsed how I would act during the interview, professional, calm, and fair. I wouldn't let our history influence my reactions, but I also wouldn't hide who I was. For the first time, Alaric would see me clearly, without our family's bias. The next day, I dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit, pulled my hair back into a sleek ponytail, and went to the conference room where interviews were being held. I sat at the far end with the other observers, reviewing his resume again and preparing a few reasonable technical questions. At exactly 2 p.m., Elone walked in with Alaric, and I felt my breath catch. I hadn't seen him in over a year. He looked older, more polished, dressed sharply, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told he wasn't good enough. For a moment, old memories resurfaced. The years when I watched my parents direct all their attention toward him. Then I remembered where I was now. In a leadership position I had earned. Tekizhian Solutions occupied the top 3 floors of a modern skyscraper in downtown Seattle. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, with modern art on the walls. I could tell by Alaric's expression that the space made an impression. Elaine introduced the interview panel. Saran from HR, who had spoken with him earlier, Lucian, our technical director, and Thalia, our senior project manager. She then gestured toward the observers section, where I sat with 2 other executives. We also have members of our leadership team observing today, she explained. They'll be sitting in to maintain consistency across the process. Can you tell us about your experience managing complex technical projects? Alaric launched into a polished answer about a marketing campaign he had overseen. I coordinated multiple departments, managed a large budget, and delivered results that exceeded expectations, he finished, leaning back as though expecting praise. And which project management methodologies did you use? Lucian asked. Alaric paused. I prefer to stay flexible and adapt to each project, he said, avoiding specifics. I don't like to rely on rigid systems, Thalia continued. Can you show us how you would set up a Kanban board for a software development project? His confidence faltered. Well, I would delegate that to the technical team, he replied. My strength is strategy, not daily technical tasks. The interview continued similarly, with Alaric sidestepping technical questions and focusing on strategy and networking. Can you tell us about your experience managing complex technical projects? Alaric launched into a polished answer about a marketing campaign he had overseen. I coordinated multiple departments, managed a large budget, and delivered results that exceeded expectations, he finished, leaning back as though expecting praise. And which project management methodologies did you use? Lucian asked. Alaric paused. I prefer to stay flexible and adapt to each project, he said, avoiding specifics. I don't like to rely on rigid systems, Thalia continued. Can you show us how you would set up a Kanban board for a software development project? His confidence faltered. Well, I would delegate that to the technical team, he replied. My strength is strategy, not daily technical tasks. The interview continued similarly, with Alaric sidestepping technical questions and focusing on strategy and networking. When asked about his technical understanding, he became dismissive. Let's be honest, he said with a slight smirk. People like me aren't hired for coding. We're hired to lead, motivate, and connect with the right people. I have contacts at major corporations who could be valuable clients for TechAcision. Saran, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Our senior project managers need both technical knowledge and leadership. They must understand our products well enough to guide their development. Alaric waved his hand dismissively. That's what technical support teams are for. In my experience, effective projects are led by people who understand both business needs and technical processes. No offense, but self-taught professionals without formal backgrounds often miss the larger strategy because they focus too heavily on the technical aspects. Everyone in the room, including me, knew that Tizian had been built entirely by self-made individuals. Elon's eyebrows tightened slightly at his comment. Can you tell us about a time you faced a major challenge on a project and how you resolved it? Lucian asked, keeping his tone professional despite the tension in the room. Alaric began explaining a story about saving a marketing campaign when a vendor failed to deliver. He claimed he spent the entire weekend making calls to find a replacement vendor, and that his boss was impressed he handled it alone. I held back any reaction. I knew the real version. This situation had happened at his previous job, and his assistant, who later applied at TechAcision, had been the one working all weekend while he took credit. As the technical questions continued, Alaric became visibly uneasy, checking his watch several times and growing increasingly frustrated. I think we're getting lost in unnecessary technical details, he said. As I mentioned, my value is in strategy and my network. I'm being considered for senior roles at multiple companies, so it would help if we focused on how my skills would benefit TechAcision. Elon exchanged a glance with the panel and nodded. We're actually close to the end of our scheduled time, she said. Before we finish, our CEO, who approves all senior hires, would like to ask you a few questions. Alaric straightened immediately. Meeting the CEO wasn't part of the agenda. Of course, he replied, adjusting his tie again. I look forward to it. Elon turned toward the observer area. Celine, would you like to continue? I stood and walked to the front of the room, watching recognition spread across Alaric's face. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion, surprise, and finally discomfort. Hello, Alaric, I said quietly as I extended my hand. It's been a while. He stared at me, stunned, before finally shaking my hand. His palm was damp. You're the CEO? He asked, barely audible. Celine Victoria Drayton, founder and CEO of TechAcision Solutions. I confirmed as I took a seat across from him. I stayed out of the initial screening because of our relationship, but I make the final decisions on senior positions. Alaric's complexion drained as he looked around the room, realizing he had no way out of the moment. I have a few questions, I continued, opening the folder with his resume. "You list yourself as an executive marketing strategist, but when I spoke with Hargrove Partners last week regarding a potential collaboration, Percival Hargrove said you're a marketing associate. Can you clarify this?" He froze at the mention of his boss. "I handle executive-level projects," he replied. "It's more of a functional title than an official one." "I see," I said, making a note. "Your resume also says you know Python and Java. Can you briefly explain how you would use either language to develop an API integration?" "I oversee teams that handle that," he answered, pulling at his collar. "As I mentioned, I work on strategy, not coding." "I understand," I said, closing the folder. "One last question. You mentioned having strong contacts who could bring significant business to Techvision. Can you provide specifics and how those relationships have produced measurable results in your current resume?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Marigold's father, my girlfriend's father, is a partner at a major consulting firm, and my dad knows business owners in Pittsburgh who might." His voice faded as he realized how weak this sounded. His connections were essentially borrowed from others. "Thank you for your time today, Alaric," I said, rising to conclude the interview. "Our HR team will contact you about next steps." He shook my hand again, visibly shaken, clutching his portfolio like a lifeline. Elone walked him out. Before leaving, he looked back at me with a mix of uncertainty, embarrassment, and perhaps the start of understanding. Then he was gone, and the room fell quiet. Lucian exhaled. "Well, that was unexpected. I take it you two know each other." "He's my brother," I said, gathering my notes. "That's why I didn't participate earlier. Please evaluate his application using our standard criteria." The team nodded, though I could tell they had questions. Her emphasis on the last words made me smile despite the situation. No matter what came next, I had built a team that valued competence and integrity. I had barely composed myself when Alaric pushed into my office without knocking, his face red with frustration. "What was that?" he demanded, shutting the door harder than necessary. I stayed seated, maintaining a steady tone. "That was a job interview for a role you applied for." "You made me look ridiculous," he snapped, pacing around. "You set me up." "I did no such thing," I replied. "You applied to my company without doing basic research. If you had, you would have known I was the CEO. Your lack of preparation isn't my responsibility." He stopped pacing and stared at me. "How was I supposed to know? You never talk about your work." "I've tried for years," I said evenly, "but no one in our family ever showed interest. Still, a quick search for Techvision Solutions CEO would have shown my name and photo." Alaric ran a hand through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of our father. "Dad's furious," he muttered. "He's coming here." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "He's coming to my office?" "I called him right after the interview," Alaric admitted. "He and Mom are already in Seattle, visiting Marigold's parents. Despite multiple invitations, my parents had never visited me in Seattle. Yet they had traveled across the country to meet their future in-laws. "Alaric," I said carefully, "this is my workplace. Whatever family issues exist should be handled privately, not brought into my workplace." He shrugged, showing both frustration and a lack of respect for boundaries. Too late. They're probably already in the building. Right on cue, my phone rang again. Another call from reception. "Miss Drayton, your parents are here and would like to speak with you. Should I send them up?" I closed my eyes briefly to steady myself. "Yes, please escort them to my office. And could you ask Alan and Callista to join us in about 10 minutes? Having additional people present might keep the situation from escalating unnecessarily. While we waited, Alaric received a text and glanced at it with a self-satisfied look. "Marigold's father might invest in your little company," he said. "That's the advantage of connections." Before I could respond, the door opened and my parents walked in. My father, Edmund, entered first with the same severe expression I remembered from childhood reprimands. My mother, Isolde, followed, her gaze moving across my large corner office, clearly surprised by what she saw. "Celine," my father began immediately, "what is going on? You embarrassed your brother in an interview. Is this some kind of payback?" I stood calmly, maintaining my professional posture. "Hello, Dad. Mom. Please sit. There's no need for this to become confrontational." "Don't tell me what this needs to be," my father snapped, still standing. "Alaric says you ambushed him, asked unfair questions, and made him look incompetent." "I did none of that," I replied evenly. "Alaric applied for a senior role at my company without realizing I was the CEO. The questions he was asked were standard for every applicant." My mother, now seated beside Alaric, asked, "What exactly is your company? Are you the CEO here?" She looked around again. The awards, the skyline view, the office setup, finally absorbing what she was seeing. "Yes, Mom. I founded Takizhian Solutions 6 years ago. I'm the CEO and majority owner." I couldn't hide the pride in my voice. My father waved this aside impatiently. "That's irrelevant. What matters is that Alaric needs this job, and you have the ability to help him. That's what family does." "The role he applied for requires technical experience he does not have," I explained. "Hiring someone unqualified wouldn't be fair to other candidates or responsible for the company." "So you refuse to help your brother?" he demanded. "After everything we've done for you?" Something in me tightened at that. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked quietly but firmly. "What are you referring to?" My father looked taken aback. "We raised you. We supported your education." "No," I said, surprising even myself. "You raised me, but you didn't support my education. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. You funded Alaric's expensive university, not mine. You never supported my career, never showed interest in my work, and you uninvited me from Christmas because you were afraid I'd embarrass you in front of his girlfriend's family." My mother protested. "That's not what happened." "It's exactly what happened," I said. "Dad called me a week before Christmas and told me not to come because Alaric was bringing Marigold, and you wanted to appear respectable." Those were his exact words. Alaric looked uneasy. "I didn't know that," he said quietly. "Of course not," I replied. "You were busy sending me photos from the celebration I wasn't allowed to attend." My father's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. Let's stay on topic. The issue is the job." "No, Dad," I said. "The issue is much bigger. I've always been treated as less capable than Alaric. I built this company from the ground up, worked tirelessly for years, and none of you ever showed real interest or support." A knock interrupted the tense moment. Alan and Callista entered, composed and professional. "You asked us to join you, Celine," Alan said. "Yes, thank you," I replied. "Mom, Dad, this is Alan Price, our HR director, and Callista Rowan, my executive assistant. They're here to ensure our hiring procedures are clear." My father frowned. "This is a family discussion." "Actually," I said firmly, "it started as a work matter. Alaric applied for a position here. Our relationship has no influence on our hiring standards." Alan stepped forward. "Mr. Drayton, we follow a structured and consistent hiring process. All candidates are assessed using the same criteria. The senior project manager role requires specific technical skills. My father turned back to me. You are the CEO. You can make an exception. I could, I agreed, but I won't. This company's success depends on placing qualified people in the right roles. Alaric isn't qualified for a senior project position. So that's it? He demanded. You're turning your back on your family? No, I said. I am maintaining the professional standards of the company I built. Then I looked at Alaric. There are entry-level positions in marketing that might suit you. You'd start at the bottom, learn the necessary skills, and work your way up. There is opportunity for growth. Alaric looked offended. Entry-level? I have 5 years of marketing experience. Yes, I acknowledged, but not in technical project management. These are different paths. This is outrageous, my father said. You're punishing your brother because of your own insecurities, always trying to prove you're better than everyone. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, I've built a $200 million company from nothing. I employ more than 200 people. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. What I'm trying to do is run a strong company built on merit and effort, not favoritism. My mother, who had stayed unusually quiet, finally spoke. Celine, after all these years, can't you put your resentment aside and help your brother? Family should come first. That's an easy principle to use now, I replied. Where was family first when I was excluded from Christmas? When you wouldn't help with my college expenses, or when you dismissed my career as a phase for years? My mother looked uncomfortable. Things weren't always perfect, and they still aren't, I said gently. But I'm not refusing to help Alaric. I'm giving him a genuine opportunity to join the company at the right level and learn the business properly. That's more support than I ever received. My father shook his head with frustration. This is pointless. Come on, Isolde. Alaric, we're leaving. Your sister has made her choice. Alaric stood and adjusted his jacket sharply. I wouldn't work for you anyway, he muttered, clearly hurt. I have other options. As they moved toward the exit, I called after them. Alaric, the offer is still open. If you reconsider, contact Alan directly. My father guided them out, but before leaving, my mother paused and looked back at me, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in years. Her expression was conflicted, confusion, resentment, and maybe a hint of recognition. Your office is beautiful, she said softly. You've done well. It wasn't an apology or congratulations, but it was something, an acknowledgement, however small, of what I had built. After they left, Alan and Callista remained, both concerned. Are you okay? Callista asked. I took a long breath and nodded. Yes. For the first time in a long while, I think I am. Standing my ground, speaking honestly, and refusing to minimize myself felt freeing. I feel like I'm becoming the person I was always meant to be. 2 weeks passed with no word from my family. I focused on work, finalizing our European expansion plans and preparing for our move into a larger office. The confrontation had been unpleasant, but also clarifying. For the first time, I spoke openly, without apologizing for my success or hiding my achievements to keep others comfortable. One Sunday afternoon, while reading on my sofa with a cup of tea, my phone rang. It was building security. Miss Drayton, your parents are here. Should we send them up? I sat upright, surprised. They had never visited my home before. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed. When I opened the door, they looked noticeably older than they had 2 weeks earlier. My father's shoulders slumped slightly. My mother's smile hesitant. Celine, my mother said softly. Thank you for seeing us. We should have called, but we weren't sure you'd agree. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They walked into my living room, taking in the modern decor, the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city view. I noticed my mother looking for family photos and finding none. "Can I get you water, tea, or coffee?" I asked, choosing politeness to ease the tension. "No, thank you," my father said, calmer than during the office confrontation. "We won't stay long." We sat, my parents on the sofa, me across from them. Silence hung between us until my father spoke. "Alaric lost his job. The day after we saw you, his boss learned he was interviewing elsewhere and let him go." Pearl Hargrove was known for disliking disloyalty, so I wasn't surprised. "He's been looking for new positions, but nothing has worked out," my mother added. "And Marigold broke up with him last week. She said she needs to focus on her career." I felt a genuine pang of sympathy. Losing a relationship and a job in the same week is difficult for anyone. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Is he doing okay?" My parents exchanged glances. "He's staying with us," my mother said. "He's having a hard time." I waited, sensing there was more. My father cleared his throat. "Celine, about what happened at your office and at Christmas. What your father is trying to say," my mother continued, "is that we've been thinking, and we're beginning to realize." "Realize what?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "That we've been unfair to you," she said. "We overlooked how hard you worked and what you achieved. We shouldn't have excluded you from Christmas. It was cruel," my father added. I was taken aback. My father had never admitted being wrong before. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Is it because you want me to hire Alaric?" My father flushed. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because seeing your office made us realize we don't truly know you. We focused so much on Alaric that we ignored what you were building, and we shouldn't have. We should have been proud of you," my mother said. "We should have supported you." I felt a mix of validation, old hurt, and cautious optimism. "It's not too late," I said. "But things must change. I won't downplay myself or my work to make others feel comfortable. Not anymore." My father nodded slowly. "We understand, or at least we're trying." "About Alaric," my mother said gently. "The offer still stands," I replied. "He can apply for the entry-level marketing role. Promotions will be based on performance, like everyone else, but I'll make sure he's evaluated fairly." "That's more than fair," my father said. "I'll talk to him." After a pause, my mother asked, "How did you do it, Celine? Build all of this on your own?" It was the first time she had shown real interest in my work. I told them about the early years of Takishin, the setbacks, progress, long nights, and small victories that shaped the company. As I talked, something shifted in their expressions. Not only acknowledgement, but genuine respect. They finally saw me as a capable adult who had created something meaningful through her own efforts, not just their daughter who needed to stay in her place. When they left an hour later, nothing was completely resolved. Decades of neglect and favoritism couldn't disappear in one conversation. But a door had opened, creating the possibility of a different relationship. The following week, Alaric contacted Alan about the entry-level position. He sounded humbled. Alan put him through the standard process, and he was interviewed by the marketing team with no special treatment. To my surprise, he accepted the job despite the salary cut. On his first day, he came to my office, nervous but determined. "I want to do well," he said. "Learn the business properly. Earn my place." "That's all anyone expects," I replied. He hesitated. "And I'm sorry. For Christmas and for other things." I nodded. "Show me through actions, not words. That's how trust is restored." As spring turned to summer, small changes appeared. My mother called regularly, asking about my work with sincere curiosity. My father adjusted more slowly, but made an effort, sending articles about the tech industry or asking about expansion plans. Alaric surprised everyone by taking his role seriously, arriving early, staying late, learning from coworkers. He still slipped into entitlement occasionally, but he was improving. In July, I received an invitation to my parents' anniversary dinner. No restrictions, no conditions, just an opportunity to gather as a family. As I confirmed, I reflected on the past 6 months. Being excluded from Christmas had forced long-ignored issues into the open. The confrontation in my office was uncomfortable but necessary, ending years of silent accommodation. We weren't a perfect family. We never would be. Too much history existed. But we were finding a new path, one based on honesty, respect, and the understanding that healthy relationships require effort from everyone involved. Standing up for myself hadn't destroyed my family, as I once feared. Instead, it made room for something more authentic to grow from the remains of old assumptions, something that, with time, might become stronger and healthier than what existed before. For now, that possibility was enough.